is Counterpoint, and I'm your host, Tanya Granic Allen. We're back with our current events panel, and there is no shortage of controversy to unpack this week. We'll start with Canada's wildfire crisis and the growing backlash from the United States as smoke drifts across the border, adding yet another point of tension to the Canada-US relationship, especially as it threatened the US hosting the FIFA World Cup final. We'll examine growing anger over politicians spending taxpayer dollars on perks and expenses, while Canadians are questioning whether elected officials are being held accountable. We'll look at the challenges emerging from artificial intelligence after a lawyer relied on fake AI generated legal cases, raising questions about trust and responsibility in this age of new technology. And finally, we'll discuss the debate in Regina over a mosque broadcasting the call to prayer over loudspeakers and the broader questions it raises about religious expression, community standards, and accommodation in Canada. So we have lots to get through, and joining me now is Michelle Simard, lawyer and privacy and cybersecurity specialist, and Mike Patton, political commentator. Mike, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. Lots to get through, but Mike, why don't we start with you, because you're presently, as we film, in Manitoba, so you have a very close look as what's going on in terms of these wildfires that are in northern Ontario, towards Manitoba.
Right. I'm in the Manitoba right now and surrounded for hundreds of kilometers in every direction with nothing but flammable things. And there are some major fires in northern Ontario and in Saskatchewan as well. And, with basically one way out to the south and one way west to Saskatchewan, the PA is very vulnerable. So it's a unique situation where we're worried about evacuation from the wildfires while we're taking in evacuees from the floods.
Wow. Wow. What a crazy time. Now, I live in southern Ontario, like in the Toronto area, if you will, and but a little north, a little rural. And, we saw those plumes billowing in haze. Michelle, I'm sure you're actually right in Toronto. You saw that orange sky. You woke up one morning, you're like, what the heck happened?
It was an orange sun, actually. It looked like it was on fire. My kids were like, "Is the planet melting?"
Oh, yeah, that must have been really actually traumatic for young kids to say, what the heck happened?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And the
And
smoke. I shouldn't have walked them outside with the dog because they were choking. And it was bad. It was really bad. So after that, it was just like they have to stay indoors forever, like for the rest of it till it's gone.
now, wildfires across the country, I mean, I know we're used to hearing probably a little bit more in British Columbia. And of course, there was the huge devastation in Alberta, but we've had fires. It's normal to have fires during fire season in Northern Ontario. I mean, the um, borealis, the boreal forest, is a huge expanse in Canada. And I don't think a lot of international politicians truly understand what our geography and topography is like. And Mike, we have at some point recently, we have President Donald Trump demanding that perhaps Canada should be tariffed on all our smoke that has made its way to
Sure.
the United States.
Yeah, this is hilarious. It's almost, if you listen to Donald Trump, you think that half the Canadian population is lined up along the Canada-US border blowing smoke into the United States. And as everybody knows, that's not what happens. When you have forest fires, when you have major fires burning, the smoke goes where the wind blows. And some of that smoke is blowing into the US, and Donald Trump is livid.
Totally livid. And I'm sure he felt really the situation was exacerbated because the World Cup final was being hosted in New Jersey,
Yeah.
just outside of New York. And I know, as we've read, FIFA officials were actually debating whether it should be moved because that is not a covered stadium. Now, thanks be to God, it seems like the quality of the air had improved, had ameliorated prior to the game. So I can understand the frustration, but it's not like the Americans don't have forest fires. And by the way, they have a far less forestry than we do. Michelle?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there's been a lot of experts who have commented and said that they're very surprised about Donald Trump's remarks. I'm not, because the evidence-based approach has gone out the window with Donald Trump. And so for me, I sit there. They're like, the United States has been brutal too. They go, it goes both ways.
Yeah,
And both
pollution
work
goes both
together in
ways.
conjunction.
Right. What
Yeah.
about pollution?
Yeah.
What about
So they're
siphoning
like,
of our water?
yeah. So they're like, it's both ways. They find like the lack of evidence-based comments, it doesn't facilitate, it only exacerbates.
Okay, we're going to pick this up in just a moment. Welcome back to Counterpoint. I'm joined by Michelle Simard and Mike Patton as we unpack a lot of the current issues hitting Canada these days. Let's move on, maybe still in a political vein, but to political spending. This is always a perennial favorite when politicians behave in a silly manner and spend our money stupidly and inappropriately. Okay, so maybe I'll let Michelle, you start this off. So an Ontario member of provincial parliament, also a cabinet minister, has resigned a seat. Why?
He didn't resign his seat. He
Sorry, his
resigned
post.
his cabinet position.
Yes.
Yes, his cabinet post. He's still remaining as an MPP. Mr. Cho has realized apparently the error of his ways, because obviously it's bad press, but I'm always stunned about how people need bad press to find out they have error in their ways. He lives relatively close to Queen's Park. He doesn't need to go to a hotel. But I think it's just like what I've been talking about for many years. Nowadays, government gets the C team. The A team wants to just continue doing what they're doing, making more money, and anyone who goes to government is just because, well, at the end of the day, they think it's a better job, but they have no idea, no proper training, and they think this type of conduct is acceptable. That, oh, I get things paid for now, and it's just like common sense just doesn't exist anymore. For me, I would have felt extremely guilty of charging, and I live in the city. And if I was so beaten tired, I would have just said, you know what, I'll take a taxi.
Well, the whole thing seems very
But
strange. And I know at one point, Mike, and you can chime in a moment, but the excuse was used, it was for family reasons because he doesn't see enough of his family. But how is staying at a hotel downtown help? Is the family coming with you? Is this like family time? I mean, and did you not know what the job entailed when you signed up for it? You basically work for the people. What happened to, what is all that, Mike?
Well, it's crazy, and Stan Cho was a very good minister and a very capable guy, and it takes a lot of people, a lot of failures here for this to happen because he probably didn't book the room. A staff member booked the room, and when he or she was asked to book the room, why didn't they say at that point, "But minister, you live half an hour away. Why not just go home?" And then it had to be approved. And this wasn't a one-off deal. This happened a number of times, which is how the money really racked up. So people were approving this ongoing before it ever hit the media. So there's a lot of people, not just the minister, that should take blame, but this comes down, I find this fascinating because I'm in the PA. I travel a fair bit for work, and I have to charge expenses, and I have to watch my expenses. First of all, I have to be able to justify them to the person who's paying for them, number one, but also to Revenue Canada. If I'm paying it the freight myself, I have to be able to explain it to Revenue Canada, and it's crazy to me because there's no way that Revenue Canada, in my opinion, would have approved these expenses if they were private sector expenses.
Well, and it's insane. And apparently this is not the only, at least in Ontario's government, is not the only MPP who's done this. And it's very straight. Like, and I almost had one of these.
Guys.
Yeah, there's a number of guys and gals. And it's silly that the public purse is used as a personal purse. Another thing that is raising eyebrows is recent airplane food expense to the tune of $160,000 on the federal plane that carts Prime Minister Mark Carney around. So on one trip, $160,000 of airplane food was expensive. That must have been some really good Wagyu steak, right, Michelle?
Well,
I just think, again, it's absurd. I don't know. Like, for me, the first thing I would have said is just like, guys, the perception. I always tell people the perception. I'm on two boards. Every time we make decisions and do things, I always tell people messaging is key. Perception is extremely important when you deliver a message. And I'm not quite sure it just went out the window. I understand people need to eat well, but at the same token, I sit there and be like, it's an airplane, it's a trip. You want to eat well, go to a restaurant on your own dime when you get to that country.
So what is it, Mike? Is it just people get into power and then power kind of corrupts, or do the blinders come off? What's going on here?
It's not usually corruption. It's usually just entitlement mentality, and talking about the fact that it's $180 some odd thousand for food is kind of misleading. The real number is per passenger. Per passenger that received food, we're talking about $3,000, almost $3,000 in airline food per person. Like, that's a lot of, like, that makes no sense to me. I don't even know how you could ring up that bill, but it becomes, when it's not your money, you just don't care about the cost. And that's
Wow.
very irresponsible.
Yeah, especially while Canadians are tightening their purse strings. Very, very irresponsible. Okay, we're going to pick up a new topic in just a moment. Welcome back to the Current Events panel. Join me again, Michelle Simard and Mike Patton. Thank you both for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And now we're going to shift gears to, again, more questionable behavior, this time from a lawyer. Michelle, can you unpack why was a lawyer suspended for 6 months and fined? What happened in Ontario?
Well, it was a lawyer who did real estate litigation, and she went to court. She presented evidence to the judge, and the judge, who has clerks and so forth, they always double check and verify things to see if what is being put forward is accurate. Did they get the correct assessment from the judgment? And of course, when they did that, they realized that these cases didn't even exist, and that it was likely, as we've heard in the UK, in the United States, other parts of Europe, and even in Africa, lawyers have been using ChatGPT and other AI devices to draft factums, which is kind of like a presentation of evidence of the facts and cases and so forth that that lawyers present to judges to argue their case. And so obviously she was caught. She then blamed her law student, which I find ironic, because the one thing I learned when I was a litigator was, I remember one time my assistant didn't tab things correctly. And when I was showing the judge information, I was like, oh, apologies. I didn't double check my assistant. I said, and it's actually the wrong tab. And I remember getting scolded saying, counsel, do not blame anybody but yourself.
Right.
You should have double checked your work before you showed up.
Okay,
And
so
I can
this
tell
lawyer
you,
didn't.
yeah, I can tell you, I never made that mistake again. I trusted my assistant. So but this is a person who's been practicing law since 1995. So I'm kind of sitting there going like, well, is this sloppy? Have you shut down to blame a law student or like a junior lawyer? To me, was disgusting. What's even worse is then she gets caught using Chat GPT herself to deal with her punishment. And that was even worse. So she claims she didn't know how to use this type of technology, and then she's caught actually using this technology when she's being investigated.
Okay.
And so this is why she got this fine. So
So
why is this an issue? Why is this a problem? Because lawyers charge every 6 minutes for their time. And some people charge over $500 an hour. So even if she spent 15 minutes on this factum, but then went to court, she charged for that time in court, which would have been likely hours and hours and hours she would have billed for a failed case that was going nowhere. So I have a problem with this as a lawyer in so many ways, and 6 months and a fine, to me, she got off lucky.
Yeah, actually, you brought up a good point. And Mike, I want to throw to you here because the point that Michelle just raised is are people profiting off taking shortcuts? And in this case, it seems like it was the case. And she was fined, et cetera. But it brings the broader question about utilizing AI. Should lawyers be utilizing AI at all? And what role, what would you caution lawyers going forward, Mike?
Well, there's two aspects to this case in particular. One was she made up precedent, and the judge was very clever. He saw that the first precedent was Donald Duck v. Daffy Duck, and right away that came into question whether that was legit or not. But if a lawyer, I have no problem with lawyers using AI to be more efficient because Michelle's right. A lawyer can charge $500 an hour. And if it takes them 3 hours to draft a document for a client, that's $1,500. But if they can draft something comparable in 15 minutes using AI and only charge the client for 15 minutes, that's fantastic. However, my concern is that most lawyers, no, I shouldn't say, some lawyers would use AI, draft a document in 15 minutes, and then charge the client for 3 hours. That would be unfair.
Right. And then,
Unethical.
well, it's unethical, of course, if that is the case. And, again, I, I don't think AI is this evil thing. I think, I've seen people who've found ways they can use it for, and then as long as they're doing something more efficient with that time afterwards, I think that's okay. Your mind's still working. That's important. That being said, uh, fine, whatever. This lawyer put whatever she did through this AI, the factum through the generating AI generating ChatGPT. She should double check it. Like, where is the review? Yes, double check her assistant's work. Double check your own work.
Yeah. And realistically, to then blame somebody afterwards is even more grotesque. Because I sit there and say, own it, and fix it, and then you get
The
caught
sad part, though,
again.
Michelle,
Yeah.
the sad part, though, is the person who suffers here is actually the client, because they don't get to have a
Yep.
second time in court unless they can somehow convince them that this judge should be removed and they get a new one and get a review. But it doesn't work that way. Anyhow, we're gonna be right back. Welcome back to Counterpoint. We're going to shift gears to Saskatchewan now, where a mosque in Regina has their publicly on loudspeaker adhan, their call to prayer, um, which is broadcast, I think, 5 times a day, has been suspended because the community has responded not so favorably at times, and some people are very supportive, some people are not. And for those who don't know, uh, in the Islamic religion, they do set prayers a certain time of day, and they change depending on the sun and the moon, etc. So, an easy way, if you're in an Islamic country, you'll hear on loudspeaker the call to prayer announced, and that's when you know, okay, this is the time. So they did this in Regina. It was tested in many, many municipalities during COVID. I noticed that during Ramadan, during 2020. And I don't think they're still going on. But in Regina, they're trying to bring it back or have it continue. Mike, why don't you unpack this for us?
Well, this is something, as you explained, that is done at many mosques around the world. Not every mosque does this. Different types of Islam do it more than others, but it's a very local decision, and it was being done at this mosque in Regina, where the call to prayer was being broadcast. And certainly, the municipality initially approved it, and there was complaints, and now everything is dialing back. What makes this really interesting is there's two aspects to this case. First of all, religious freedom. Does the mosque have the right to do a call to prayer? And is their freedom of speech inhibited by a restriction to that? And the second thing is people's privacy, and just, do they have to be forced to listen to this? Because if this is played over a loudspeaker and you live in the neighborhood, you're not hearing this. So is it disruptive to the neighborhood, and is it an unreasonable practice? So there's great debate on both sides of this issue.
Yeah, I find it. I don't, Michelle, you can weigh in a moment. I think there are noise bylaws, right? Well, I know there are noise bylaws, and they're very clear. Like, you cannot blast music at this time. You cannot start in the 2 a.m. in the morning putting Van Halen on a loudspeaker. You just can't. I'm Catholic. We have the Divine Office that requires, I think, 6 times a day prayer, right? 7 times sometimes, 6 times. That is not broadcast over loudspeaker. You just know by your watch, you set this time, and you know when you're going to do your prayers. I recognize there are church bells that sometimes ring before services. I think that usually noise bylaws have exemptions for that, and I'm sure this mosque was granted an exemption. I get it. Like, I love religious freedom, and I'm all for people practicing their religious freedom. I just think that this is probably stepping over a line where the noise bylaw and it's becoming almost while it's aiding Islamic prayer, it's a nuisance to those who are not from that religion. Michelle, what do you think?
Well, to clarify, it was only being rung once a week, on a Friday at noon. So it wasn't being done 6 times. And yes, it's for those who, prayer to the east. And for me, it was something that I understand the premise. I've seen what they were saying, their modus operandi of why they were doing it. The only problem is it can be quite loud. And this is where society always has this problem, right? We have to go on the scales. It was just like, is this infraction worthy enough to take away these people's rights? And this is
Right.
what we do, you know, in the social contract that we have in society. Is this worth it? And it perhaps could be done still, but take the decibels a little bit lower. Because I think, as we all know, and anyone who has an iWatch, the minute you get a little too loud, it tells you high loud noise, high decibels, keep it this rate, it's bad for your hearing. So at the end of the day, I think just lowering the volume might be helpful and test casing that, but it seemed like they were very, very agreeable to try to make a case that's going to work with the
Which I
community.
do appreciate
And
that
that's important.
they're engaging the community. I like the way they're rolling. I'm like, very good PR. But where does it stop? I mean, we live in a religiously pluralistic society. Yes, this is a Christian country by our foundation, but you know, there are a lot of religions. What happens if the Buddhists want to do something or the Hindus want to do something? Where does it stop? If you grant one exemption, where does it stop?
Well,
Well,
it
you need to
doesn't.
keep
Go ahead.
you need to keep a level playing field. So if you're going to allow the Catholics to ring their bells on a Sunday for 3 minutes, should you allow Muslims to do a call to prayer once a week for 3 minutes? You know, it's really, you've got to try to keep the playing field level. But you know, with technology, I don't even know that this is logistically necessary anymore. They could send out notices to all their members to their phones, reminding them, saying it's 2 minutes to prayer time, and they could do that literally 5 times a day, and no one would know about it except for the members of the mosque.
Okay, thank you both. We got to run. We've run out of time. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.